All right, so here right now for this IXL, you're going to work on writing equations of sine functions using the properties, right? So what we want to do, we want to make sure that we understand how to do this thing and kind of what to do. So off to the side here, I'm going to make sure I just draw a unit circle, right? So we know what's what. So we know that this would be 2 pi, this would be 3 pi over 2, this would be pi, and this would be pi over 2. We know the coordinates for this one would be 0, 1. Coordinates for this one would be -1, 0. Coordinates for this one would be 0, -1. And this one will be 1, comma 0, right? So anything pi or 2 pi really doesn't matter for us just because that sign of those values would be 0, right? So we want to start off by stating our equation. All right. So what we have for our equation is f of x is equal to a sine b x plus c plus d. And for these set of problems, we're going to be looking for our d function. So right here, right now, we have a corner point negative pi 0. So we can go ahead and write it down. So our coordinate point would be negative pi comma 0. And this will be our x and our y that we'll substitute, right? Our period is 2 pi. So our period is always 2 pi over b. But in this case, we want to know what b is. So b is 2 pi over our period, right? So our amplitude is 1 for this problem. So we're going to put a is 1. And we want to find out what d is. So we always want to start with c is equal to 0, right? So then we want to substitute. So f of x is the same thing as y. So for this equation, we have 0 is equal to a, which is just 1, sine of our b, which is 2 pi over our period. Our period is 2 pi, so that's just 1 as well. And then we substitute our x. So our x is negative pi, right? Plus d. So sine of negative pi is the same thing as sine of pi, because sine of negative pi will go in this direction. Sine of positive pi will go in this direction, but they end up at the same point, right? So the y value at that point is 0. And we know sine of negative pi is 0. So d will be 0. So our function here will be sine x. So we go back to our Excel and we just go ahead and type in sine x and hit submit. All right, for our next problem, we have find the equation for sinusoidal function that has period 2 pi, amplitude 1, and contains the point pi over 2 comma 1, right? And so as we go to our whiteboard, we have our information. Our amplitude is 1, our period is 2 pi. So 2 pi divided by 2, b will end up being 1. All right, so let's write that information in and kind of scoot over. So b is 1. C, we're going to set to be equal to 0, and we want to find d. So our x is pi over 2. Our y is 1. So sine of pi over 2, our y value will be 1. So we have 1 is equal to 1 plus d, right? So we both have positive ones here. So that means when I subtract this one from both sides, d will end up being 0. And our function here will be sine x again. All right, for the next problem, we have an equation for a sinusoidal function that is period 2 pi, amplitude is 2, and contains the point negative pi 0. So for this particular problem, we now have a different amplitude than before. So here our amplitude is 2. That means A will be 2. So as we go here and we write it, A is 2. Our period is still 2 pi. So 2 pi over 2 gives me 1. So our B is 1. And we set C to be equal to 0. We substitute in it for X and Y. You have 0 is equal to 2 sine negative pi plus D. Well, sine of negative pi, right? Again, starting from here, negative pi, right? Sine of negative pi, our Y value here is 0. Now, if you had the cosine function and they said negative pi, then that's when you would use the X value. But since we're doing all sine functions, we're only paying attention to the Y value, right? So sine of negative pi is 0, 2. So we'll end up with 0 equal to 2 times 0 plus D. So then D here is 0. Now the only difference is with our function, since our amplitude was 2, we're going to say it's 2 sine of X. All right, now, with this new problem, new equation, what we have is we have to find an equation that has period of pi, amplitude of 2, and carries a point negative 3 pi over 4, comma 2. So as we go to our whiteboard, we see our information. So A is 2, B is 2 pi over pi, which will give you a value of 2. And then we have negative 3 pi over 4, comma 2 as our point. So right here, right now, what I do notice is I want to deal with this fraction first. So I'm going to rewrite this as 2 times 2 sine, right? And I want to deal with this inside. So on this inside, I know I could cross my 2 and my 4 out, and I'll end up having a negative 3 pi over 2, right? Because 2 goes into 4 twice, right? And so right here, right now, what I notice is negative 3 pi over 2 is the same thing as saying positive pi over 2. And positive pi over 2 is 1. So I have 2 equals to 2 times 1 plus D, right? Again, my 2 times 1 will be 2, and this 2 are both the same sign, so I know D will be 0. So when I write my answer in, my answer will be 2 sine of 2x, right? Because our A is 2, our B is 2, our C is 0, and our D is 0. So it'll be 2 sine 2x. All right. Again, same type of problem. What we have is we have a period which is pi, amplitude is 2, but now this time our point is negative pi over 2 comma 3. All right, right here, right now, again, our A is 2, our B is 2, just like the last problem, right? Because we had a period of pi and an amplitude of 2. Our quarter point is negative pi over 2 comma 3. So we set up our equation. 3 is equal to 2 sine of 2 times negative pi over 2 plus D. Well, we know these 2's can cancel out, and we're left with sine of negative pi. So as we rewrite our problem, we have 3, 2 sine negative pi. And again, negative pi and positive pi are the same number, and for us, that would be 0. So that means in this instance, D equals 3, right? So D equals 3. Why? Because sine of negative pi is 0. 2 times 0 gives me 0, so D is equal to 3. So when we put our answer in, we're going to put 2 sine 2x plus 3. All right. Let's do one more just to keep it even. And since we have a period of 4, we'll end up with a different type of problem. All right. So what we have in this equation, or this question rather, we have a period of 4 pi, amplitude of 1, and it contains the point negative pi comma 4. So as we write down our information, our A is 1, our B is 1/2 because we had 2 pi divided by the period of 4 pi, which gives us 1/2. And then our X and our Y is negative pi comma 4, right? So we set up our equation. 4 is equal to sine 1/2 times a negative pi plus D. Well, a negative pi times 1/2 just gives me pi over 2, right? A negative pi over 2. So I can rewrite my function and equation like so, just so I can see it. We already know what it's going to be, but I just want to be able to see it. And we know a negative pi over 2 is the same thing as saying 3 pi over the 2. So if we're starting here, negative pi over 2 in this direction. So our point would be negative 1. So we have 4 equal to negative 1 plus D. We add 1 to both sides. Then we realize that D is equal to 5, right? So our amplitude is 1, period is 1/2. So when we write this, it's going to be sine x over 2 plus 5. All right, so I think that suffices for what you need. I hope this helps. If you got any questions, let me know.